So once Adam gets authorization to die in the empty and infinite cold vacuum of space, a giant hole rips into the station. Samus triggers the gravity suit and is able to run along the floor to safety. You hear that? That's the sound of physics being raped. Even if the gravity suit cancels out the gravity fluctuation from outer space, it's not going to cancel out the hurricane of air sucking Samus out of the ship. Also, every other Metroid game, the gravity suit permanently turns your suit purple, but in this game it just makes Samus do the Kaioken whenever it's active. You head back to the bioweapons research lab and find James, the mustache marine, dead, proving once and for all that James is the deleter, since everyone else either has an alibi or was killed by the deleter himself. Not that his identity matters anyway, these marines have the personality of white bread, and none of them contribute shit to the shit story. Next you find Ridley dead, so chalk that up as another plot thread that went absolutely nowhere. You find the survivor, and then you fight a Queen Metroid. This is where every single problem with the game's engine collides into one ultimate shitstorm. The Queen sends out Metroids, and they can be frozen, thank you very much, Adam, complete with an ass-pulled explanation for why they can be frozen, but once you freeze them, they have to be finished off with missiles, since your beam doesn't actually damage them. You end up fighting 4 Metroids at once, and since you can't move and fire missiles at the same time, your only real hope is to freeze all 4 Metroids and then start unloading missiles to finish them, because if a single Metroid is unfrozen, they'll latch onto you and suck you dry the second you stop moving. The problem is that the Metroids don't stay frozen long enough for you to freeze all 4 of them before they start thawing out, especially since they can dodge your beams, and freezing the Metroids in the first place is difficult because you have no control over how Samus aims in the third person. She fires at Metroids that are already frozen, or the Queen herself, instead of the ones that still need freezing. It's also annoying trying to get Samus to aim at the Metroids attacking you, because they all get at hyper close range. You have no control over which enemy Samus targets. Samus typically doesn't aim at enemies that are even slightly elevated above you, and the controls are about as stiff as Adam's rigor mortis corpse. Also, the screw attack, which Fubar's souped-up ink-possessed Metroids in Metroid Prime 2, doesn't even mildly irritate them, because there is exactly one way the developers want you to play this boss fight. Plus, the Metroids and the Queen herself have attacks that cannot be dodged with the sidestep, because this is the final boss and they decided to ratchet up the difficulty by tying an arm behind your back. So now we have another cutscene. This one clocks in at 12 minutes and 12 seconds, where you run into the survivor. She tells you that she's the real Madeline Bergman, and she tells you what's really going on. The girl you encountered earlier was MB, in an android body, so the Metroids imprint on a living creature like a parent. When she developed a soul, still not explained how, the scientists tried to remove her emotions, and MB went crazy and now wants to destroy all humans. Not really sure how you get from point A to point B there on that train of thought. Only about 10% of this cutscene is new information, the other 90% is Samus repeating what we already know, and it doesn't help that her monotone voice acting is physically painful to listen to. I'd play some of it for you, but I don't have so many subscribers that I can afford to start driving them to suicide. This cutscene also spends a ludicrous amount of time showing that Madeline and MB had a mother-daughter relationship. Metroid Other M has a central theme of motherhood, and I'm only bringing it up now because it's a theme that is pretty much completely absent from the story until the last 20 minutes. Samus is vaguely characterized as a mother grieving the loss of her child, and I say vaguely because this only manifests as her saying the word baby every other sentence, and she can't bring herself to shoot a baby Metroid or MB because of her maternal instincts or some such bullshit. Madeline treats and fully considers MB to be her daughter for reasons never explained, and MB is the mother figure to the Metroids. The ship where all the shit's going down is shaped like a baby bottle and called the Bottle Ship. Hell, the title of the freaking game is a paper-thin anagram for the word mother. The problem is that even though the game has a central theme of motherhood, I am completely unable to figure out what the hell the game is trying to say about motherhood. The perceived betrayal of her mother figure is the villain's motivation, and the scientists knew a mother figure would be the best way to control the Metroids, but is that really all the game is saying about motherhood? That parents can easily screw up their kids and babies bond to figures that are physically there for them? Because those are both lessons taught by Professor No Shit Sherlock. The only other message I can find regarding motherhood in the game, and I stress this is not my opinion, I'm just calling it like I see it, is that all women yearn to be mothers so desperately that they will parent anything vaguely resembling a child that comes into their orbit. It fit right in with the rest of this sexism in the game. This game spends pretty much this entire cutscene bludgeoning you over the head with a theme of motherhood, but it has absolutely nothing to say about motherhood, and it does basically nothing with its own supposed premise. MB shows up to try and kill Samus and Madeline, but then a squad of Marines shows up to kill MB. She responds by summoning a horde of monsters. You have to play this extremely annoying minigame where you shoot away the monsters with missiles, but they just keep coming no matter how many times you shoot them, and eventually I run out of missiles and die. Next I'm thinking you probably just have to survive long enough for the power of cutscene to kick in, but no! Get this, you're just supposed to get the monsters out of your face long enough to scan MB, and this triggers a cutscene where the Marines gun down MB. Samus hesitates to shoot MB because she's a mom, you see, and I think I just threw up in my mouth a little.
Unfortunate what happened to Commander Malkovich. Would you agree, Aaron? Sadly, with them gone, you're just an outsider.
Why does every Federation official treat Samus like shit when the entire staff of the Federation in Metroid Prime 3 treats her with nothing but the utmost respect and reverence? Oh, and Anthony is still alive by the power of Deus Ex Machina. It turns out that Anthony triggered the emergency brake to stop that whole bottle ship is heading for Federation space problem. So, let's recap, shall we? Adam killed all of the Metroids, MB killed the deleter off-screen, Ridley got punked out by the Metroid Queen, Anthony stopped the bottle ship from invading the Federation, and the Nameless Marines gunned down MB, the main villain. Samus contributes nothing to the story of her own game. Come to think of it, Samus contributes nothing to the story of her own game and basically does nothing useful throughout the entire story, and the game has a central theme of motherhood to the point that every female character is a surrogate parent. I think this game is trying to say something about women's place in society, but I'd like to get married to a girl someday, and that's not going to happen if I say what it is. Samus, Anthony, and Madeline all escape the bottle ship, the end, except not actually. After the credits, Samus goes back to the bottle ship to retrieve something that was left behind and cannot be replaced. See, even though the entire game up to now has been strictly 100% linear, it still has to pretend that it's an exploration game. So now that you've got power bombs, you can explore the entire ship looking for the roughly 50% of the items that are impossible to get in the main campaign. Unlike the other Metroid games, there is no 100% ending. Finding all of this crap does nothing except unlock hard mode. What's hard mode? Why, it's the incredibly hellish gameplay mode where you have to beat the entire game again with no energy tanks, no missile tanks, no accelerator charges, and no saving throw. See, in the normal game, if you take a hit that should kill you, you're left with one hit point so that you can try to heal. Emphasis on try. The hard mode doesn't do that, you just drop dead, and this means that you can die without ever getting the opportunity to heal, and several enemies in the second half of the game can kill you in a single hit without energy tanks. So yeah, master the art of mashing the control pad to auto-dodge every attack that comes your way. The game expects you to master it. Oh, and once you beat the game, you unlock a theater mode where you can rewatch any of the game's cutscenes, or, if you want, watch all of the game's cutscenes with pre-recorded gameplay in between as a 2-hour-long movie. 2-hour-long Other M movie, or play it again without extra health. It's hard to decide which is the deeper circle of hell. At any point during the epilogue, you can go to the control room to fight a boss from Super Metroid that serves absolutely no purpose to the game other than to reference Super Metroid. And for some reason, even though Fantoon smashes all of the windows, no air whatsoever rushes through the cold vacuum of space. And finally, you recover what it is that's so important that Samus had to go back for it. Adam's hat. God damn, this is a dumb game. For some reason, Samus decides to strip down to her underwear to pick up Adam's hat, and then decides not to put it back on through the entire trip back to her ship as the bottle ship spontaneously self-destructs, even though, near as I can tell, she's much faster with her armor on. What's funny is people actually try to defend this scene by saying that Samus is in her Zero suit so that she has a free hand to carry Adam's helmet. Hey guys, you see that? That's an arm and a hand that Samus can use to carry things when she's in her armor. This scene exists for one reason: fan service, and not even good fan service because the camera zooms out too far to appreciate the many views of Samus Aran, and I really need to end this review before every woman watching this telepathically kicks me in the penis. Lord knows the game hasn't done that enough already. And that was Metroid Other M, or as I like to call it, I don't care how many fans try to start arguments with me over how this game portrays Samus, this game just destroyed her. Her complete submissiveness and unwillingness to shit without Adam's permission is a complete contradiction of everything we've seen about her in previous games, and while it does admittedly develop her character, it develops her into a character that just isn't appealing, a character that we don't want to play as anymore. And setting aside how the game mutilated a once great character, this story is horrendous. About 3 or 4 major plot threads are are dropped at a moment's notice, and the story never really figures out what it's supposed to be about. The game markets itself as being about Samus's backstory and then shows almost none of it. The villain's motivations revolve around themes that aren't present until 20 minutes from the end. The game beats you over the head with a theme of motherhood, but the only things it has to say about the subject are insultingly simple or simply insulting. Samus doesn't accomplish a single thing in the story, to the point that you could cut her out and I don't think the story would change at all. Plus the dialogue is so awfully written that even without the flat voice acting, it just makes you squirm every time you're forced to sit through it. The way the game's story is structured, it makes you think they wrote a big story and then realized, oh shit, we have to build a game around this. Depending on how often you die, the game is about 8 hours long, and from a story standpoint, very little happens in the first 6 hours, and then the last 2 hours is one hideously long info dump cutscene after another. And the sheer fact that this game gives you the option of watching it as a straight up 2-hour-long movie pretty much shows that this game was a pet project to tell a fan fiction story first and an actual game to be played second. The gameplay itself cycles between being mediocre and being outright broken. It never got bad enough that I wanted to quit, but I was forcing myself through this game by the end, because the story sure as hell wasn't motivation enough to keep playing. The controls for the third-person mode are stiff and awkward because of the stupid-ass control pad. The first-person mode was only thrown in as a marketing gimmick, and it doesn't work in the game at all. The aiming in third-person basically has you shooting whatever the hell the game feels like shooting at, so the entire game is peppered with annoyance. Half the mechanics don't mesh at all with the other half, and the game's frame rate chugs when certain large groups of enemies are on screen. About the most I can say about the gameplay is that it was not so bad that I ever got bored. It's as close to a compliment as you're going to get. But in spite of the flame wars and the massive forum debates that rage over this game, there is one inescapable and indisputable fact about this game. Metroid Other M bombed! Once word got out just what this game does to the character of Samus, many fans, myself included, decided they'd rather pass on the game altogether than watch one of their most beloved characters be violated before their very eyes. It took 2 years for Mother M to reach the 1 million units sold mark, which for a AAA game is pretty pathetic. This game single-handedly sank the Metroid series from being Nintendo's flagship franchise alongside Zelda and Mario to being banished to the black hole where Star Fox and F-Zero reside. And considering how bad the game is in the first place, the fact that this game sunk one of my favorite franchises is just a handful of salt into the festering, pus-filled wound that is Metroid Other M.
Yes, all quite depressing, isn't it? How does it feel to watch something you once cared so deeply for collapse, rot, and die before your very eyes? Yet such is life. To live just long enough to watch everything you care about wither and die. And it's not just Metroid. Nintendo is losing the console war, becoming more obsolete every day. What are you doing?
Fuck no.
Stop that. Stop that. Stop that.
No, you can stop further Metroid games from being made, but no matter how badly Other M blows ass, it still can't take the good games away from us. So my advice, stop the flame wars, just save yourself a lot of grief, and just let Other M rest in its grave, and focus on the good games. Life's too short to keep obsessing over shit you hate. But before we finally wrap things up, there's one more thing that needs to be discussed. I actually did some research on this game when I was writing part 3 of this review, and this 100% depends on whether you believe what the internet says or not. There is one very simple reason why Other M sucks so badly, and his name is Yoshio Sakamoto. Sakamoto was one of the co-creators of the original Metroid, I'll try not to hold that against him, and director of Super Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission. He's basically the father of this franchise. Other M was supposed to be his magnum opus. He wanted to make the bestest Metroid game with the bestest story ever, and he made pretty much every single decision behind the game. Sakamoto wrote the entire game's story, including all the shit with Adam and the infamous Ridley scene. He also directed the game's English cast, despite not speaking a word of English. He forced Samus's voice actress, who I hear is actually quite talented, to speak in that god-awful monotone because he thought it would evoke a shell-shocked war veteran. He also forced Team Ninja to build the entire game using the Wii Remote-only control scheme, despite Team Ninja's repeated pushes to use the nunchuck. Sakamoto even knew there were problems with the Wii Remote control scheme, but his ego was so big that he kept it anyway rather than admit that he'd made a mistake. The massive overemphasis on cutscenes wasn't just Sakamoto crafting his narrative masterpiece of storytelling, it was also an attempt to attract audiences in Japan, where the Metroid games have never been popular. Oh, and the gravity suit looking completely different than it has in previous games when Sakamoto directed the game that introduced it? He thought the regular gravity suit looked too stupid to have to look at it during the roughly half-hour solid of exposition at the end of the game. Pretty much the only positive thing Sakamoto did with his tyrannical reign over the game was shoot down Team Ninja's attempts to add their trademark fan service, limiting their efforts to a handful of ass shots. Team Ninja gets blamed for the game's suckiness, but they were pretty much just hired to do Sakamoto's grunt work, and they had little to no influence on the game besides just being the ones who got it finished. Like Daikatana and the Star Wars prequels before it, Other M is just another example of what happens when one executive is given way too much creative control over a project, because you end up with a guy who can't write, writing what he thinks is a timeless epic, nobody touches it up for him, and then he has millions of dollars to make it into an actual product. One of the primary creative forces behind the Metroid series wrote this entire game himself, and as far as he believes, wrote her 100% in character. What's funny is the fact that Sakamoto severely screwed up his own creation by forcing his own vision of what it should be. That's a far deeper message about parenthood than anything this pretentious dung heap of a script has to say about the topic. Pissed off that nobody else likes his masterpiece as much as he does, Sakamoto has stated he'd rather let the Metroid series rot in purgatory than ever make another one. But considering that 2 Metroid games were announced at E3 2014, it looks like Nintendo is more than happy to continue the series without him.
Or, you know, take one of the only female-led gaming franchises in the world and hand it over to faceless male space marines just like every other shooter in existence! God damn it, Nintendo.
Melissa wasn't insane, no. One day, a consciousness simply bloomed within her. And those that caused it to bloom,
What?
the humans,
What?
insanity.
I can't hear you, but I'm sure whatever you're saying is really, really stupid!